All right, guys. Today we're going to talk about HIV, AIDS, it's their connection, and whether there is a connection, and also the question of having a set of symptoms and then uh, uh, coming to a conclusion on whether you have some kind of condition or not. So, one of the best videos on the HIV/AIDS thing is Dr. Sam Bailey's video, The Yin and Yang of HIV. It's really, really good, and I encourage you to watch it. So, she's much more of an expert on it than me. But I'm just going to be giving you the homeopathic perspective. By the way, if you are, if you want to support me, please do smash the like button and the subscribe button. And also, you can get treatment from me, homeopathic treatment. Feel free to get in touch. So, anyway, what's going on with HIV and AIDS? Let's give this a listen.
To review the current theories and those that challenge them. There needs to be a cooperative but urgent reassessment of AIDS. A Nobel laureate stirs the waters. In 1988, Dr. Kary Mullis, the 1993 Nobel Prize winner for chemistry, was employed by the US National Institutes for Health to set up analyses for HIV testing. When preparing his report, he asked a virologist colleague for a reference that HIV is the probable cause of AIDS.
So, at first glance, you can see that she is must be an absolute monster and a conspiracy theorist and an evil, whatever you want to come up with. I'm obviously facetious. She looks like a very pleasant, lovely woman, lady. So, of course, she is not a conspiracy theorist. She's looking at the facts, right? She's looking at what Kary Mullins said, who's one of the leading experts on HIV and AIDS.
He was told he did not need one. Mullis was surprised. I disagreed. It was totally remarkable to me that the individual who had discovered the cause of a deadly and as yet uncured disease would not be continually referenced in the scientific papers until that disease was cured and forgotten. There had to be a published paper, or perhaps several of them, which taken together indicated that HIV was the probable cause of AIDS.
So the first line of that was HIV is the probable cause of AIDS. And I wrote that, and then I said, well, I need a paper, some kind of scientific paper, to reference that statement. Because when you make a statement like that, that's like a fact. You need to say, here's how come I know that.
Otherwise, as Mullis was forced to conclude, the entire campaign against a disease increasingly regarded as the 20th century Black Death was based on a hypothesis whose origins no one could recall. That defied both scientific and common sense.
All right. Well, I'm not a very, very high level expert on this topic. I haven't looked into whether there is no recorded or there is no um, evidence that links the two things. But unfortunately, we do see this in medicine, having a collection of symptoms and then putting a label on it is a unfortunate pattern that we witness in medicine. This exists as homeopaths. We know this, right? We don't put labels on patients. We treat the patient based on their personality and things like that. So we don't put diagnostic labels on patients. So we are, as homeopaths, fully aware of this phenomenon. And when the medical establishment is forcing specific diagnoses and scaremongering. Um, and they're engaged in scaremongering. You know that something is not right, right? Something is not right.
A decade later, Mullis was to write, I finally understood why I was having so much trouble finding the references that linked HIV to AIDS. There weren't any.
Here's how come we know that HIV is the probable cause of AIDS. There was nothing out there like that. Nothing.
Indeed, an interested, non-specialist observer armed with a few contacts and a good library merely has to scratch the surface to realise that the HIV theory of AIDS begs many more questions than it answers. The beginnings of AIDS.
Yes, it's very mysterious, and my opinion is, up until watching this video, was also that AIDS is just a breakdown of your immune system after having taken um, many courses of antibiotics, for example. And not just antibiotics, other types of allopathic treatment. And, if you do this regularly, like every month, some people do it like every month, your immune system is going to break down. I'm sorry to break it to you, but that's what's going to happen. And of course, who are these people? Well, these people who do this are people who get sexually transmitted diseases, other types, frequently. And we're not going to go into who those people are.
The few years leading up to the AIDS era and the discovery of HIV are illuminating. It was a time when a promiscuous minority of young, liberated gay men in a few
Right.
large American cities were increasingly developing previously uncommon diseases such as fatal forms of the malignancy Kaposi sarcoma and of fungal pneumonia known as PCP.
The debate about the role of promiscuity in defining urban gay maleness has been changed utterly and forever, because now gay men are dying. Gay men like you and
Yeah, so these people were basically promiscuous and well, that's my theory, right? These men were promiscuous and exhibited symptoms regularly of all kinds of skin symptoms, which might not actually have been very harmful or very serious. But if you keep taking antibiotics, you're going to destroy your immune system, and then AIDS. They tell you AIDS comes in, and then you're going to get the AIDS treatment, which is going to destroy it even further. Of course, yeah. I mean, nowadays they tell us that it's the AIDS treatment is much safer, but back then it's a fact, right? Back then they were extremely harmful. So,
me.
At the time, whilst it was reasonable to implicate an infectious microbe transmitted by rampant, indiscriminate sexual practices interspersed with needle sharing and drug taking, the fact that
yeah, and also the drug takers, right? The drug addicts. They also probably exhibited all kinds of symptoms. A drug addict living on the street, homeless. I'm sure if they went to the doctor and then they said, "Oh, you have this. Take the antibiotics," and then take it again and again and again, and the same thing happens while taking drugs, right? Without not stopping the drugs.
immune suppression had multiple causes was also known in 1981. Some considered the diseases resulted from multiple assaults to bodily functions caused by the many and varied diseases, toxins and treatments that accompanied the gay and drug-taking lifestyle that had evolved during the late 1970s. Just how extensive these multiple assaults were was indicated.
Yeah, I mean, sexual excess drugs and all that lifestyle, it's just going to break down your immune system. It's very, very simple. There's nothing mysterious about it. There's no mysterious virus or anything. It's just that people enter from excessive negative stimulus. People enter into states, altered states, not altered states mentally, but a there's a picture which they develop, and you can call that AIDS or you can call it anything else. I'm sure that well, I'm sure that people do develop all kinds of symptom pictures, and a lot of them we haven't even identified. But the media at that time, well, not anymore. I mean, not now. Nowadays they stopped, but at that time, the media was doubling down on HIV because it was one of Dr. Fauci's, cash cows or something. That's all it was.
By the English journalist Neville Hodgkinson, documenting the range of infections of just one homosexual, the late Michael Callan, in his book AIDS, The Failure of Contemporary Science, How a Virus That Never Was Deceived the World. Hodgkinson writes, from 1973, when he came out as a homosexual, to 1975, he only got mononucleosis and nonspecific urethritis. In 1975, he had his first bout of gonorrhea, but from there it all began to snowball. First came hepatitis A in 1976.
Yeah, that's what happens. It gets more and more and more serious. It's not just with these people. It's this. This is how the human body works. So, if you have allergies, you start taking antibiotics constantly for every little sniffles or anything like that. You start to develop asthma, and then you start to develop pneumonia, and then you take antibiotics for that, and then it gets worse and worse and worse and worse. That's what antibiotics do. I mean, antibiotics can save lives. I'm not against that. I'm not against antibiotics when it's an emergency, a life or death situation. But apart from life or death situations, I wouldn't recommend them.
Then more NSU and gonorrhea. In 1977, amoebas and hepatitis B, NSU and gonorrhea. 1978, more amoebas, my first case of Shigella, and more VD. Then in 1979, hepatitis A, third time, non-A, non-B, amoebas, giardias, a fissure, and my first case of syphilis. And of course, more gonorrhea. In 1980, the usual gonorrhea.
Well, listen to that, right? Listen to that. Nobody's going to survive all that stuff. And all of that was treated with antibiotics, right?
Shigella twice, and more amoebas. Added to that list.
If you left the first thing alone, when he got herpes or whatever that was, just leave that alone. Don't make it more serious.
Were herpes simplex types 1 and 2, venereal warts, salmonella, chlamydia, cytomegalovirus, Epstein-Barr virus, mononucleosis, and finally cryptosporidiosis. Indeed, an early US CDC study confirmed that the first 100 men with AIDS had a median lifetime number of 1,120 sexual partners.
Okay, that's a lot. Even I didn't have that many.
Allen himself put it, by 1981 I got some combination of venereal diseases each and every time I had sex.
Promiscuity is a vague word which means different things to different people. But until we develop a better vocabulary, promiscuity remains the best word we have to describe the historically unique phenomenon of large numbers of urban gay men who have large numbers of different sexual partners in such commercialized settings as bathhouses, back rooms, bookstores, balconies, meat racks, and tea rooms.
Not surprisingly, given the widespread belief of a causal relationship between immunity and the maintenance of health, in 1981 the new disease became known as gay-related immune deficiency, GRID.
The National Center for Disease Control is reporting more cases of two rare and deadly diseases found in homosexual men. There is no apparent explanation for the outbreak.
Obviously, this is an issue with great emotional fervor, but
how can we stay unemotional when people are dying every day from a disease the CDC has?
Technology and virology.
All right, let's keep ahead a little. I think we discussed all that there was to discuss there in the previous part.
Coincidental with the beginning of the AIDS era, a technique was developed to classify and count the different types of lymphocyte white blood cells. It was noticed that some AIDS patients had diminished numbers of the so-called T4 helper cell subtype, and despite lack of proof, the cells were assumed to be dying at the behest of an agent selectively targeting them. This became the hallmark of AIDS as well, forming a measure of the amount of immune deficiency. In turn, this immune deficiency, the AID in AIDS, caused the diseases, the S in AIDS, that constitute the clinical syndrome. The perceptions that T4 cells were dying and AIDS was infectious led to the theory that AIDS is caused by a microbial organism.
AIDS is not a disease, right? AIDS is a whole lot of different things. Depends on what country you're in.
5 years prior to the AIDS era, a few laboratories around the world.
Yeah, I think, you can measure someone's T cells and it might be low because you destroy your immune system. So that doesn't contradict any kind of anything I've said. So
we're drawing towards the end of a fruitless search to prove a viral cause for human cancers. During the 1970s, Dr.
So basically, modern medicine focuses on pigeonholing sets of symptoms. And for some reason, they have a fixation on doing that. And that's not how the body works. You have signs and symptoms, and you have a symptom picture. And sometimes it's going to be similar to other people's symptoms, but sometimes it's not. So that's why in homeopathy, we just prescribe based on mental and physical general symptoms, not the disease symptoms.
Robert Gallo, the central figure as co-discoverer of the AIDS virus, and his colleagues claim to have discovered 3 human retroviruses. In 1975, the first human retrovirus, HL23V, was proposed to cause human leukemia, but by 1980 was considered an embarrassing mistake, in fact not to have ever existed. Of the remaining 2, one was postulated to cause a specific, though rare form of adult leukemia, and the second remains orphaned without a disease. What is significant is that the latter 2 retroviruses are said to exhibit a liking for T4 lymphocytes. This led Donald Francis Gallo and others to propose that an existing or closely related retrovirus was the agent responsible for killing the T4 cells in AIDS patients. When researchers actively sought and then discovered the same diseases in individuals who were not gay, retroviruses as well as retrovirologists received renewed interest and GRID became AIDS. First proclamations. In May 1983, Professor Luc Montagnier and his colleagues at the Pasteur Institute in Paris published a paper in Science entitled Isolation of a T lymphotropic retrovirus from a patient at risk for acquired immune deficiency syndrome, AIDS. It is important to note that the first word in this paper, isolation, serves as a signal that the researchers are claiming proof for the existence of a new virus.
Yeah, I think there isn't much proof. Guys, I'm going to wrap it up here and then just continue in the second part, and because the video is going to be too long. So I'll see you in the next part. And remember, hit the like button and you can get in touch for homeopathic treatment. Thanks.